Hi, that was creepy. Hi, my name is Alana. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. And this week's book review, rather, is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessah Moshfegh. This book has quite the hype around it. And so I sometimes like to read hyped up books to see how I feel about them. I'm not afraid of critiquing the things that other people like. Also, this is part of my millennial fiction reading project, which which I still haven't done a review on. But I will say, if you are curious, I do have a blog post about it. Blog link down below. If you just search millennial in the search bar at the top, it'll pull up the post. I've also talked about it a couple of times on my Instagram, so there you go. Maybe I'll link to that below so that makes sense. So yeah, though this is part of my millennial fiction reading project, because how could I not put this book on that reading project? It's a given. Almost how Sally Rooney is a given, even though I'm not a fan. Side note, I'm reading Conversations with Friends in October. Pray for me, because I already have a feeling I'm probably going to hate it. Things, I suffer so you don't have to. Let's get into this review. I had started hibernating as best I could in mid-June of 2000. I was 26 years old. I watched summer die and autumn turn cold and gray through a broken slat in the blinds. My muscles withered. So my year of rest and relaxation chronicles our unnamed narrator's decision to take a year off to hibernate as a way to reset. Though she is currently in the book living in bustling New York in 2000, she's heavily medicating herself. She secludes herself, and thanks to her horrible psychiatrist, who made me laugh quite a few times, attempts to drift off into dreamland. This psychiatrist will give her any and all the drugs that she wants. It's a shame. So, however, this effort to hibernate is perforated with memories of her parents and her troubled upbringing, in her toxic relationship with her frenemy Riva, and this jerk that she kind of casually dates on and off named Trevor. Trevor is a jerk. Ugh, Trevor is the worst. Okay, Trevor. Throw him away. The narrator, like I said, has set out to hibernate as a way for herself to be reborn. Sleep felt protective. Something was getting sorted out. I knew in my heart this was perhaps the only thing my heart knew back then. That when I'd slept enough, I'd be okay. I'd be renewed, reborn. I would be a whole new person, every one of my cells regenerated enough that the old cells were just distant, foggy memories. My past life would be a dream, and I would start over without regrets, bolstered by the bliss and serenity that I would have accumulated in my year of rest and relaxation. The second awakening was at midday. I came to with my thumb in my mouth. So throughout this novel, the narrator talks about sleep almost all the time. She's obsessed. And how she is feeling and actually how she's interacting with her environment and the very few people that she does come in contact with reveals the stage within her hibernator project. Wow. Reveals the stage within her hibernation. I cannot speak today. Hibernation project that she's in. There is a lot of fetal baby imagery and mannerisms. And I think that if you really wanted to go through this narrative with a fine-tooth comb, I think this would probably be easier to do if you ever choose to reread this book. You could pull out the stages, how it's progressing, if you were to take a fine-tooth comb and go through this imagery, and you'd be able to map her rebirthing process, because it shifts throughout the narrative. Based on the imagery, you could see almost what stage in the womb she's in. What's really interesting is that there are times when the narrator does sleepwalk or engage in normal social activities like running errands and going to parties, even though she's technically in a blacked out state. She has no idea how some of these things happened, but she has like relics of these ventures out into the world. And even though her ultimate goal is to black out for black out for a year and really not leave her apartment, it's almost as if Moshfegh is posing the question or making the point that a person cannot completely blot out being an active participant in society because the subconscious will always try to pull the individual towards socialization. Having a trash chute was one of my favorite things about my building. It made me feel important, like I was participating in the world. My trash was mixed with the trash of others. The things I touched things other people had touched. I was contributing. I was connecting. If you've read Howard's End by Forrester, Forrester. I always want to call him Foster. That the phrase "just connect," which Howard's End is famous for, "just connect," kept kind of popping in my mind. So anyway, something also that occurred to me while I was reading my year of rest and relaxation was that this could also be read as a commentary on the pharmaceutical slash health industry and how it takes advantage of people. So with 2 seconds within this novel, you're going to figure it out. This narrator is suffering from depression. And not just, I would argue that she has severe depression. She is emotionally numb in a lot of ways. She's like a shell of whoever she was, or maybe she's not really even sure this is why she has to be reborn, or she feels like she has to be reborn because even though from the outside you would look at her life up to a certain point and think, oh, this woman has it all together, she doesn't. Who is she really? Does she even really know who she is? And so, yes, I would make the argument that she has severe depression. And her psychiatrist is a nut job and just hands out all of these medications and gives her client whatever she wants. The narrator is lying to her about certain things just to get what she wants. And the psychiatrist does no she doesn't do any checking in the background. I am shaking my setup. She doesn't fact check. She just gives her what she wants. And this narrator is mixing and matching these drugs at will to achieve this blacked out state. And honestly, there were several times throughout this narrative I was like, and this is not a long book, it's under 300 pages. I was like, I'm surprised she didn't die just from the concoctions that she would put together. And yet behind the scenes, we have these corporations, this industry that's profiting off of those in these severe states who need way more than just pills. I'm not saying that there aren't ever medications that truly help people, but proper care and proper therapy is beyond medication. I heard a doctor say once, and for a doctor, this is pretty radical I don't know how many doctors feel, but he was very blatant about this. He's actually been kicked off YouTube because he doesn't say things according to certain narratives. But he was just like, don't ever allow yourself to be a cash cow for the pharmaceutical industry, because every patient healed is a customer lost. So in a way, yes, in this character in particular, there are massive entities behind the scenes that are profiting off of her depression. It's really a matter of listening to your instincts. People would be so much more at ease if they acted on impulse rather than reason. That's why drugs are so effective in curing mental illness, because they impair our judgment. Don't try to think too much. Again, when you think too much, you start questioning things. You start looking at other ways to see, how can I fix this problem without, relying on these other entities to fix it for you or tell you that they can fix it for you. they want to keep you in this system because you're nothing but a dollar sign. So yeah, I've never seen anybody kind of make that take from the reviews I've read and watched on this book. Maybe I'm reaching. Let me know what you think if you've read this book. But I do think that Moshfegh, in a way, is critiquing the pharmaceutical industry because they didn't help her. So yeah. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about with this book, again, this is a book I think that I think it's best to go in blind, but I'm going to contradict what I say right now, and I'm going to say I need to talk about a spoiler because I need feedback. So I'm going to throw something and see if it sticks. I've not seen anybody else talk about this with this book. So if you prefer not to be spoiled, please feel free to exit out. Thank you for joining me. But if you don't mind being spoiled, or if you have already read this book, please feel free to stick around because this is not going to be new to you. So, all right, you had time to exit out? Cool. So the last thing that I want to talk about is that after she completes her hibernation project, she does go back out into the world. The last chapter of this book takes place on September 11. And in a way, I couldn't help but think that the narrator's year of rest and relaxation, of hibernation, whatever you want to call it, acted as a type of premonition. Almost as if the narrator had to use that 1 year up, leading up to 9/11, to be reborn, which is going to parallel affairs in the world drastically changing. So this is definitely a spoiler. Reva was in one of the Twin Towers and is killed. And as dark as it seems, because their friendship, not really a true friendship, was twisted in a lot of ways. It's quite a toxic relationship. Reva's death also signifies a turning point for the narrator. My cousin and I chatted about this. She read this book finished this book a couple weeks before I started it, and we were texting back and forth. And she said, and I completely agree with her, that there are certain things in our narrator's life that had to blow up in order for her to complete this rebirthing process. And that does seem dark, but everything had to be taken down. Moshfegh drops a lot of breadcrumbs throughout the whole novel that will culminate to 9/11. She talks about the Twin Towers all the time. There's a quote in there, or a couple of lines in there about terrorism, and it's very blatant that she's leading up to something, I thought. There's also a passage in particular that I found interesting. As though the universe were orchestrated in a way as to lead him towards projects that he'd unconsciously predicted for himself years earlier. The illusion of fatal realization. And it was that one quote that made me realize, I think I'm onto something here. Have you ever had a sense that you needed, have you ever had a sense that you needed to do something, a gut instinct, you weren't sure why, but you felt that you had to get something done, and you had to get it done within a certain time frame? Because you feel like something was about to change, even if you didn't know what that something was. I feel like that's what the narrator's hibernation truly symbolized for me. Yes, there are things in her life that she needed to get sorted out with her parents, who are both dead, not a spoiler, with her these two relationships that she had with Trevor and Reva that really she needed to get them out of her life. And then you have 9/11, and her rebirth happened alongside the changing skyline of New York City. Not only that, did you know that TSA was created after 9/11? So you just have these things that certain things within the United States in particular will never be the same. because of what happened. She will never be the same after her year of rest and relaxation. And I really felt that there was something that felt rather optimistic in, even though we have the rubble of 9/11, she's feeling optimistic. That she has finally been reborn in the midst of this chaos because it had to be done in a sense. Not 9/11, but I'm talking about her rebirthing and it being mapped along this trajectory. It's dark, it's twisted. I think that's what Ottessah Moshfegh is known for. But yeah, that's a thought. Let me know what you think about that. I've not seen anybody talk about that. How ultimately I think that it's a premonition that she knows that this had to be done because something major was going to happen, even if she wasn't sure what that thing was. Yeah, so I found this to be an interesting novel. It's odd, it's animalic. There's a lot of discussion and imagery in this book on bodily functions. It's grimy, it's visceral, it's raw, and it's what people have come to expect from Moshfegh, that she is not afraid to dive into some of these really dodgy situations and characters and discuss things that are less than appealing. These characters, none of them are likable. None of them. Even if some people could sympathize with the narrator, especially when regarding her depression, she's not likable. I didn't find her likable, but I didn't hate her. I was just like, that sucks. But she's not necessarily likable. I enjoyed reading it while I was reading it. But even while I was reading it, I can't say I was particularly blown away. I found the book overall to just be okay. Again, it intrigued me enough, it held my attention enough that I read it. And I never thought about DNFing it. I almost never think about DNFing, but I read it. I enjoyed it while I read it, but I wasn't crazy about it. And I don't mean that in a good way or a bad way. I was just like, okay. It was interesting, but also I will say that when I finished it, it wasn't memorable to me. I forgot I read it, and I have a stack of books in a bookshelf of books that need to be reviewed after I've read them. They linger there for some time, but before I'm able to get around and review them. But I would look and go, oh yeah, I read that book, I should review it. I forgot that I'd read it. Again, it wasn't memorable for me. I think I see why people like it. I will say that it intrigued me regarding Ottessah Moshfegh. So I think in that way this book is successful for me, because I'm like, well, what else has she written? Because I've heard that all of her novels, even though she writes these really grimy characters, every book of hers feels distinct. So it's intrigued me to read her other stuff. And I will keep this book in my shelf. I might even just choose to reread it at some point. I think that I'd get on with Lapvana a little bit more, because it's historical fiction and it's grimy. It's the type of grime that I really like to read in a book. I know that makes me sound sick, but I think is going to be a little bit more interesting for me. And then I think after I read Lapvana, I'll go and then read the rest of her books, and I'll probably read them in publication order. But I'll probably read Lapvana next year. I was going to snag that book this year because I can get a paperback edition shipped from the UK. But again, I'll get it when I get it. The book's not going anywhere. So I'll read it when I feel the urge to read it. So yeah, overall, I gave this book a 3 out of 5. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't mind-blowing for me. I read it and I was like, okay, I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I enjoyed thinking about some of the things that I talked about in this review, but after I finished it, I was like, okay, I saw, I conquered, time to move on. Not memorable for me. How did you feel? Oh, before I move on, Ottessah Moshfegh's writing style is quite direct. It's not flowery. She has some really well-constructed sentences in here, and I will say, there's only 8 chapters in this book, but chapter 7 was the best written chapter in this book. It was really well done. And that chapter alone made me think, I see why people like her. And that chapter alone made me want to read her other stuff. Just that chapter. It was fantastic. That chapter was great, but not enough to make the whole book for me a 4. But yeah, chapter 7 showed me her skill as a writer, and I appreciated that. So yeah, I gave this book a 3 out of 5. Let me know if you've read this book, how you felt about it. Does it deserve the hype? Did it not deserve the hype? Of course, this is all subjective. And if a book really speaks to somebody and they love it, don't let me steal your joy. I'm glad something spoke to you in that way. Because again, there are books that I read it, I'm like, this is the best thing I've ever read, and other people are like, it's trash, and I'm like, okay. So I mean, again, all of that is subjective, but I do plan on reading her other stuff. Like I've said 20 times already, I'm getting hungry. And yes, if you've liked this book, or if it's on your TBR to sometime read, let me know your thoughts on it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me a comment below. If you would like to follow me on Instagram, where all of my book content gets posted first, all of my book reviews get posted first, please feel free to follow me there. Links are down below, and I will see you in the next one. My next book review will be The Count of Monte Cristo. Excited to review that book. So I will see you in the next one. Bye.